Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. We're live. Welcome to Where Are All the Women? We're all here. I'm here.
We are here.
Jenny's here. I'm so excited that Jenny Holland is back with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to see you again.
What time is it? You're in Ireland?
At 8:16 p.m.
Okay. So it's not too
in the
late.
p.m.
for
It's
you.
not too late, but my brain does start to shut off. The last one we did was super late, and actually I felt great doing it. But I need a little time to warm up. So you take the stage, Megan.
It's so funny because it's like 1 p.m. in Mexico, and that's pretty early for me. And you can hear it in my voice, right? I haven't totally woken up yet. I have not spoken yet today.
Oh wow.
So I'll get warmed up and you can get warmed down for bed.
Warm down. Well, we have the opposite circadian rhythms because I mean, I am not like a huge morning person. I used to stay up late all the time, but I don't. It takes me a long time to wake up in the morning, but I'm not particularly useful at night either. So like the hours of my productivity are just shrinking.
I'm good between.
Plus, I like to have a little nap in the afternoon.
So you've got like what, an hour at noon and an hour at 5 p.m. or something like that? Yeah. Nice. I feel like I have a solid like 2 to 12 or 1 a.m. or something like that, although I take breaks for other things. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you have questions or comments for us, please use the super chat, which YouTube has helpfully hidden. I've been informed many times. People are like, where did the super chat go? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not in charge of changing all these things so that they're worse. I would like everything to stay the same all the time. But I think there's like some kind of, in the live chat, there's like now there's a dollar button, which I feel like is, that's not like a good incentive. If you you should just have a super chat button. I think that sounds more inviting than a dollar button. Like, click the money sign, guys.
It's like we're digital strippers here. Dollars in our comments.
But yeah, I think if you click the dollar sign, then you're offered the super chat option, so you can ask questions or comments. Somebody on X asked if there was going to be singing, and I was like, maybe if the super chats demand it, I will sing some songs for you. But otherwise, no, probably no singing. So apologies to everyone that I have dropped off the planet in terms of content since early April. I always suspect, like, if I'm traveling and traveling and or working traveling, I never am able to do anything. I don't have my studio set up and my proper mic, and I just never end up having time. And particularly during these travels, which, in case anyone missed it, I drove my truck from Vancouver across America into Mexico.
That's so cool.
And it took a week and a half, and it was a lot. It was exhausting. It was awesome. I'm super glad that I did it. It was a super cool experience. I'm stoked to have my truck here for sure. But yeah, I was, driving all day, every day. And so, and by the time I would get to my motel or hotel or wherever I was staying, my brain had melted out of my head and I was totally dysfunctional. And I just had to sit in the bath for like an hour and go to bed.
That is such an incredibly badass thing to do. I'm sorry. That is like, you're going to go down in my lifetime as one of the coolest chicks I know, just for that alone. Never mind all the other stuff.
Oh, thanks. I've been thinking about it for years, because I've been here in Mexico for 5 years without a vehicle, and the truck's just been sitting in Vancouver. And people kept telling me I should just sell it. It's just an old truck. Who cares? Blah, blah, blah. But I don't listen to anything anybody else says ever. So I was like, no, I love my truck. And one day I'll bring it here. And so I finally just decided it was time to bite the bullet. And yeah, I highly recommend driving across America. Utah was really beautiful. Arizona was amazing. I love Arizona. The Mexico stretch of the drive was interesting.
That's the worrying part, really. I mean, I've heard stories about ladies traveling alone in Mexico, and they don't sound great.
No, you're not really supposed to do that. I mean, once I got to the Mexico part, I had two friends who were in another truck who were also driving. So there was somebody like around.
Like a convoy.
If something happened. It wasn't as bad as I anticipated it could have been, because I've talked to so many people who have done that drive, and for some people it's all good, and some people you run into trouble. I mean, you don't know, and that's what you have to really be prepared for. In Mexico in general, actually, you just have to be prepared for things to happen that you have no control over. And when you're on a drive like that, you also don't know. I mean, something can happen. Something could happen to your vehicle. You can run into trouble. There could be an accident. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong, and you just have to kind of be chill and figure out how to get out of situations. And as I mentioned on Instagram, sort of briefly, the weirdest thing that happened, there was lots of weird things that happened. But I knew, there's federale stops along the way if you're driving through Mexico.
The police?
It's the federal police, yeah. And, there's no real rules in Mexico. The police can do whatever they want. The cartels can do whatever they want. Which, that's something that I like about Mexico. I like that everything isn't just run by bureaucracy and rule after rule after rule after rule and red tape and so on and so forth. And sometimes so there'll be these federale checkpoints. Sometimes they pull you over and ask you questions. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you just get waved through. Sometimes they want to go through your entire vehicle. Sometimes they want money. Sometimes they harass you, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. These are all, stories that I've heard from various people. So I sort of knew to expect that I wouldn't know what would go down. I think it was the first checkpoint after we crossed the border in Nogales. They did pull me over, and then they also pulled my friends over, I think, because they were kind of with me. And, they want to know if you have money, if you have weed, blah, 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 blah. I didn't have any of those things. They were kind of like flirtatious right from the get-go. Like, they were like, the boss came over and he's like, he thinks you're very beautiful and married, but I was like, thank you. I appreciate that. And we're like going through all my underwear, like,
oh my god,
my face products, my Sephora collection, and then they got triggered because you're all gonna think I'm a fucking idiot, but when I was in Arizona, I went to this cute little like antique store, and I bought a bunch of knives, naturally, and just little knives. Like I bought like a switchblade and like a pocket knife and things like that. And I bought some other things, cowboy boots, like random strange things. And I also bought these like antique bullets from like 1915.
Oh my gosh.
And they're like, you can't bring ammunition across the border to Mexico. And I was like, you guys shut up. Like, they're like, no, Meg, no, you really can't. And I was like, this isn't, they're not like, I'm like, it's
not ammunition.
Decorations for my house. And they're like, no, this is really serious. They're like, you could go to jail. And I was like,
oh my god.
Oh, okay. Are you going to take me to jail? I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I'm just dealt with a lot of Mexican men in my life over here. And I think I know how to deal with them, which is like, you kind of just joke around with them. And
right.
Or I don't know, this works for me in any case. You can be like sort of mildly flirtatious, and you have to make sure you're not crossing any boundaries in that regard. Things don't go too far. And so that kind of triggered. They were like, well, now we're going to search your entire vehicle. So they're like underneath my truck, like checking underneath. They're like pulling out my dashboard. They're like ripping everything apart. And I'm just standing there. I'm like, you guys, come on. Like, what are you guys looking for? They keep being like, weed. I'm like, I don't like weed. I don't smoke weed. I'm like, this isn't an interest of mine. Anyway, I don't know how to work a gun, you guys.
Did you have a gun to go with the ammunition?
I don't own a gun. And then they started taking the air out of my tires. And I was like, what are you guys doing? They're like, we're looking for drugs. And I was like, you need to take the air out of my tires to look for drugs? And I was like, how am I going to get the air back in my tires? And they're like, I don't know. I guess you'll have to stay here in this little weird town in Mexico, which was not where I was going. And I was like, I'm not staying here. I was like, we're going to Hermosillo. So no. And they're like, well, how are you going to get to Hermosillo with no air in your tires? And I was like, good question. How are you going to get the air back in my tires? I'm just on the highway. There's nowhere near to put air back in my tires. Like, I can't drive to a gas station or something because there's not enough air in my tires. It's like, okay. And I sort of like, like I'm on one hand nervous, like I'm a bit stressed, but I'm hiding it and pretending not to be. And I also can tell that they're just fucking with me. Like they're playing games with me, and they're also trying to get me to stay in town. So I was like, you guys, like, come on. I was like, no. I was like, I'm not staying in town. We're going to Hermosillo. So put the air back in their tires. And they were like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, our friend will put the air back in their tires. And I was like, your friend who? Which friend? Where? Where is your friend who's going to put the air back in my tires? And they're pointing at these guys in these big semis because they have these, I don't know anything about vehicles or anything. There's like a thing to put a compressor. I think that's what it's called. And then finally I convinced them that I'm not going to stay there, and they get one of these guys in the semis to come over with the compressor, and the guy walks over and he's like, I don't have the right part, and he's showing me the end of this hose that just isn't connected to anything. And I was like, oh, you don't have the right part, huh? And my friend is like, well, when can you get the part? Like, I'm not really taking them seriously, and I think my friends are taking them a bit more seriously than I am, and who knows who's in the right at this point, if I'm like, these guys are just fucking with me, right? Or if they're actually being serious. And the guy's like, Monday. This is Friday. I was like, okay, well, I'm not staying here for the weekend. What do you mean you don't have the part? What are you talking about? And I was like, so what now, guys? They're like, we just have this big standoff. I was there for, God, I don't know, an hour and a half or something like that. It's getting dark.
I feel stressed just listening to this.
We had, like, me and my friend had some wine when we finally got to our hotel later. Yeah. The best wine we've ever had in our whole lives. It's getting dark, and you're not supposed to drive down these highways at night. It's dangerous, like pretty dangerous. And so we had sort of planned everything out so that we wouldn't be driving down these highways at night because you're really not supposed to. Anyway, so it's getting dark. We're like, fuck, this is not great. We have 2 more hours till we're getting to our destination. And finally, they pull over another guy in a semi, and he comes over. He fills up my tires for me, and I was like, thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. That was a fun time. I'm glad you had a fun time. Great to meet you. Mucho gusto. And then one of the guys comes over, asked me for my phone number, and I was like, okay. And he's like, I'm going to call you right now. He wants to make sure that it's my actual phone number. And it didn't work. And I was like, okay, well, it's probably I have an American phone. So add me on WhatsApp. I was like, okay, bye. Thanks, guys. Thanks. And then we get on our way and then have to drive down the highway 2 hours in the dark, which was also incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
But we probably shouldn't have even done that, but we just wanted to get where we were going. There's nowhere for us to stay. I'm not staying in this little buttfuck nowhere town in Mexico. Yeah. I do not want to do that. But we made it and it was okay. The highway was pretty busy. It wasn't like deserted or anything like that. And so.
Well,
whatever.
What happened with the number?
And then he was messaging me later. Hola, mi amor.
Well, this is actually a really
and then
good
we messaged back and forth for quite a while. We messaged back and forth for the whole week, actually.
Well, it might not be the worst thing in the world to have a friend in the Federales, right?
No, I was like, if anything else happens on the way, I'm gonna call you. And he was like, yeah, totally. Call me if anything happens. I'll try to help you.
So, Megan, is this a younger man?
Yeah, of course. At
There
some
you
point
go.
in our
Perfect
messaging,
segue.
he asked me how old I was, and I was like, how old are you? I think he was like 31 or something like that.
Wow.
I was like, how old do you think I am? He's like, I don't know, 38. I was like, okay. Let's
I
choose
mean,
that
that's
number.
what you look like. You don't look older than that, certainly, but
So, anyway, this is my update, guys. And yeah, this is where we can segue into
perfect.
the phenomenon of younger men and older women. I mean,
Yeah.
so did you read this article in the New York Times?
I was just reading
it was an interview, or it
now.
was a podcast. I read through the transcript.
I was just reading the transcript. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I find it so hard to take the New York Times seriously at all. Like I just the way they're talking about this is like empowerment for older women and not, which I mean, sure. Actually, if that was coming from a different source, I would probably give that argument a lot more validity. But just from their tone, it's sort of like it's very girl bossy, like older women, yay. It does, like, I don't think the phenomenon is cope, as the kids say. I think it's real. I think it's always existed as well, by the way.
Yeah.
And I think, yep, great, have fun, sounds fantastic. But the way the Times says it makes it sound like cope, and also it's not addressing the elephant in the room, which is what the Telegraph piece did, which was bring it back to how messed up young women are. Because of course the New York Times doesn't want to deal with that, do they? But again, I'm not like, I just think it's kind of funny. I mean, obviously all the conservatives on Twitter were like, there should be a law, or this is cope, or blah blah blah. Like, dudes, like, again, like I am so much in favor of conservatism now, except I'm like, you guys have to be smarter about women. Like, you don't seem to understand that women are kind of like naughty and deviant as well.
Women are also human.
Like, they're human, exactly. So
I genuinely get the
although I have to
impression.
say, sorry, I'm a married woman, so in middle age, in a monogamous relationship, not like one of those newfangled open polyamorous ones. So obviously I have no like experience of this, but I do have friends who would attest to this, that it is true and it is fun, and I believe them.
I think there's like a real thing on the right where they think that women don't actually enjoy sex. Like, that's the impression I'm often getting from these guys. Is that when they're like, I can't believe all these women are putting out on the first date, or they're not waiting till marriage, or what they're having sex with these younger men, and they're like, why would they do that? And it's like, because women also enjoy having sex and have libidos and a sex drive, and because it's fun for them and they like it. It's not that complex, guys.
I know. It's not like it's like 1800 where this has been going on for a while. You seem to have missed out.
Yeah. I mean, I just think, and I mean, I feel like you're right. I mean, this is not necessarily a new thing. I feel like I have been noticing it happen a lot more before, and I have my own theories for why that is. But I think it's less intentional and more organic than people are treating it. I think it's that these guys like these women and these women like these guys, and they're not really thinking about age all that much.
Yeah. So what are your theories?
Well, one is just that I think that older women are staying hot a lot longer than they used to.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, even just like I look so much younger than my grandparents did at my age, like night and day.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's, being 40 in the 70s and 80s, like, you were old and you looked old and your lifestyle was old and you probably felt old.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore. Like, the women who are, in their late 30s and their 40s, even in their 50s, I feel like they're living younger lifestyles and they look better and they know how to take care of themselves better. Things like lifting, like understanding that, you need to lift weights and that keeps your body healthy and looking good and in check. And, people know how to take care of their health and their skin better. And
yeah, skincare, I think, has a big role to play in this, and
Retinol.
hydration.
Yeah. Hydration. Yeah. Not, putting your face out in the sun for hours on end. And yeah, there's all sorts of things, like lasers, PRP,
Right.
again, yeah, retinol, these like skin treatments that you can do. And I do a lot of these things, to be honest.
Right.
I do not have Botox, which apparently is going out of style, I'm told.
I hope so. It's so hideous. I'm not into plastic. I mean, yeah. Anyway, that's a different discussion. But yeah, no, I think it is. It's younger looking older women. I think older women now are Gen Xers, right?
Yeah.
And we're pretty slutty. Just kidding.
we are. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I'm divulging too much about the lives of Gen X women.
I'm only kidding, guys. I don't mean it.
Well, when I was, when I grew up, when I graduated high school, it was the late 90s, and everybody was sleeping around. Everybody. So I think that really became a norm probably in the 90s. And
definitely the 80s. I'm sure it became norm before the 70s. Come on, like it's just like we've been living in a bacchanalia since 1968 or 63 or something like that. You know what I mean? I think it's been a real free for all. But there's something about like the Gen X just is an age like. I mean, my mother didn't age as much. Let me fix my thing here. My mother didn't age as quickly as her mother, and I don't think I'm aging as quickly as she aged. But it's like we're like, it seems like we're taking longer to age with passing generations.
Yeah, and we're living longer, and again, like it's sort of, we're maintaining these younger lifestyles too, and I think that contributes to staying youthful. Women are not just giving up and like, well, I guess I'm just gonna stay home and be alone and not have any fun anymore because now I'm middle-aged or whatever. They're still out and dancing and drinking and partying and staying active and having adventures and traveling. They aren't thinking of themselves as old people, and I think that reflects in your look and your vibe and things like that as well.
Yeah, I still think, I mean, I say this like maybe I'm completely wrong and I'm going to be embarrass myself, but I do feel like I have quite a young vibe. I'm 50, and it's like I tell people that, and they're genuine. And it's not because I look amazing. It's just because I don't know, I just have this younger affect, and I think people still associate 50 with like what now I would look at as 70. It's a funny little quirk of how things are going. But I also think that in terms of, also, I think I feel so much better as a 50-year-old about myself, and I give so many fewer shits, and I have so much less angst that than when I was 20. So, or even, well, I was married when I was 30. So like say 25, which is probably my peak beauty, right? I was pretty chill by then, but like in my teens and my early 20s, I didn't feel great about myself, especially during my university years. I was really unhappy, actually. And that makes you a harder sell. It's like you're harder to partner with if you're also a ball of insecurities. And now I'm not a ball of insecurities. If I was on the dating market, I could see how that would be appealing because you are just so much more comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a big part of it too. I think just like liking yourself, being comfortable with yourself, being confident. And because you're all of those things, you're also a lot more straightforward and easier to talk to, and things are more clear. Women who are older are much more likely to say what they want, and that includes like, okay, well, I don't really like this, bye, and it not be such a big deal, or this is actually what I want and this is what I'm comfortable with. And yet in general, insecurity is unattractive. I think insecurity, like unless you're a creep, you're not looking for somebody who's super self-conscious and insecure. That applies to men as well. Obviously, insecure men are really unattractive. I think women who are insecure are really unattractive too. I'm sure there's a certain kind of man that appeals to, but the younger generation, I mean, sorry to credit feminism haters, but the younger generation grew up in a feminist world, and they're less intimidated by confident and interesting and intelligent women.
That's interesting.
I think they're less uncomfortable with being challenged. They're more interested in women. They're better listeners. They really are. They're better conversationalists than a lot of older men.
Listeners. They are. Yeah. They are good. They're funny as well. Not that I know that many
and they're based.
Men. Yeah.
A lot of them are
based. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so I'm sure that appeals like women like us would, or, you know, I think it's appealing to them to be able to talk to a woman who says like gay and retarded and, you know,
it's on your t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Who thinks that, you know, transgenderism is stupid and ridiculous and gross and will just say the truth instead of getting all offended by the things that you're supposed to be offended by. I think that probably appeals to them a lot, considering that the generation of women that they're dealing with are very, very woke and
hot mess. But that's interesting that you raised that thing about feminism and that you're talking about the men and how it's maybe made young men more comfortable with confident, assertive women. But what has happened to the girls of the same age cohort? And that is that would be an interesting kind of hypothesis to test out. Like, did feminism? I don't think this is true, and I am kind of a feminism hater. But put that aside, did feminism help boys be comfortable with kind of mature and assertive women, but made girls like an angry, embittered mess?
Well, feminism lied to young women. You know, young women grew up in this world and this culture where they were being fed lies about what it meant to be empowered and about how, you know, men were and how women were. You know, I learned this as well because I technically, you know, like I grew up with third wave feminism also. It's morphed since then into something arguably worse. But, you know, I also believed that socialization was everything. You know, I thought that it was every aspect of our behaviors and personalities, likes, dislikes, our brains was all nurture as opposed to nature. We were just told that evolutionary biology was sexism.
Right.
So there's that, you know, and there was that whole theme of anything you choose is empowering. So, you know, if you're choosing to pole dance, if you're choosing to do pornography, if you're choosing to sell sex, if you're choosing to thought yourself on the internet, that's all empowering and feminist because you're choosing it. This is how you gain confidence. This is, you know, how you become comfortable with your sexuality. That was all bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
No.
Well, I just think it's interesting because this came out and then like a few days later around the same time, the New Statesman, which is this UK progressive class Bible, must read, sort of like maybe the Atlantic, maybe even more so. I don't know if it, came out with this piece that they commissioned polling on the thoughts and feelings of young women in the UK, and they are dire. And actually, it's not all young women. It's, guess who? The white, college-educated, middle and upper middle class young women, 18 to 25, are drowning in rage. They are political extremists. They came out with these stats, like 35% of women 18 to 25 have a favorable view of men. And I think it was only 11% had a very favorable view of men. They also asked boys the same age, young men the same age. They had completely reversed. Like they had higher numbers, much higher numbers of favorability towards women than the girls had towards them. The girls had very highly favorable views of communism. They were as hostile to capitalism as they were to fascism. which is
Hilarious.
truly like that makes my blood run cold. They are obsessed with Palestine. They're obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein. They're sick. They have anxiety in their body. And I wrote this article about it in my Substack, and I'm not trying to like make myself out as someone who's brave, because I'm not, but like this woman who is a TikToker who watches images on TikTok feels anxiety in her stomach, and she has to get she has this physical reaction. I'm going to have an anxiety attack. And at that age, in my life at that age, I was in Manhattan on 9/11 and was like running towards the Twin Towers when the second tower came down. And I was scared, but I had never even heard of an anxiety attack. I didn't even know that was something one could have. It was not in our parlance. Like, you got freaked out and then you just coped. You just managed and you just kept going. And like, so it's like I genuinely think that stuff like that, and I'm going to be very generous to these women, even though I think they're pretty detestable at the same time. I think that the moving image-based form of media of Instagram and TikTok has almost like bewitched them and has like rewired their nervous systems, which I think it then you could just say, turn your damn phone off and get out and dig a trench or like climb a tree or something, which is what their parents should have said. But then it's those sensations, those heightened sensations that are from these being bombarded by these images all the time, are then being like taken seriously by adults. We're like, oh, well, yes, of course, you shouldn't go to school today because you're too anxious. You're like, no, you need exposure. You need exposure therapy. You need to get off the phone and interact with physical material reality for a bit. And that would have cured that anxiety problem. And the communist radicalization is obviously, I genuinely believe it was brainwashing from the educational and policy class establishment. And it's like the rotten flower of the 1968 boomer cultural revolution.
Yeah, I mean, they're just being fed these hyper cynical, pessimistic, extremist messages constantly online. And I think within these institutions, within academia and universities and school, in Canada, kids are constantly being told that, Canada genocided Indigenous people, and they're still clinging to this myth about these mass graves of hundreds of Indigenous kids that were said to have been discovered on residential school sites that were not discovered and don't appear to be there. These really dark messages about how horrible the world is, how horrible the country they live in is, and they should all feel bad about it all the time. It was really interesting to me how many of these women they spoke to in the New Statesman piece said that they were radicalized by Palestine. They're clearly just being bombarded. Why are you, this young woman living in the UK, obsessed with and distraught over something that's happening in this tiny, tiny, tiny country so far away from you that you know nothing about, that you've never been to, that you know no one there? Like, you really have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the power of propaganda. It really is. I mean, these people are I don't know if I'm using the word correctly. I was going to say vanguard. I don't know if they're really the vanguard, because I think vanguard implies like strategic intelligence or something, maybe more like the shock troops, the emotional ballast, the fuel, for what I think they would like to be a genuine communist takeover, which actually in the UK, with the Green Party isn't as far fetched a possibility as it was, a few years ago. This article in particular, because it relates to UK women, these numbers would be exactly the same in the US, maybe even worse. Who knows? This is not
sure.
a different, the same problem. But like in the UK, we have this crazy Green Party, which is a weird mix of like queer, deviant trannies and like fundamentalist Muslims, like, okay, and it's working, in terms of getting traction. The leader is this weird snaggle-toothed like guy who did some hypnosis. I don't know. It's literally like a farce from a Monty Python skit or something. But they've got a huge amount of energy behind them. And what they're going to do is they're going to destroy the Labor Party, which is very interesting because, of course, to us righties, rightoids, the Labor Party, Keir Starmer seems like a communist to me. But believe it or not, there's parties much farther to the left of him. So, so like these women are going to be electorally very significant. And in the States, these are the same women who are the resistance, quote unquote, to common sense and reality in the form of Trump. And in Canada, I'm sure they're the same women who are upholding your crazy totalitarian state.
Yeah. I mean, I often think that it's worse, but maybe I'm wrong, in the US and Canada because they are so afflicted by TDS, by Trump derangement syndrome.
They're just as afflicted by it here. They're terrified. Like these women in this article are genuinely afraid of Trump.
Yeah.
Like they're genuinely afraid of it. There's a woman in France who moved to France. She's English. She moved to France after Brexit because Brexit was like a dress rehearsal for libtard hysteria. And I'm proud to say I voted for Brexit. It was my first encounter with woke hysteria in person when people like unfriended me for being like, wait, what? No, I read a book about it. And then I voted. I like national sovereignty. Cancel. Anyway. So this woman fled the UK after Brexit because she thought she was in danger or something, moved to France, and now has an actual TikTok account with like many thousands, tens of thousands, maybe more followers, in which she makes TikToks helping Americans escape the United States.
That's so crazy. Like these people are so deluded and retarded.
All
it's like,
over.
Do you know how many people in the world are desperate to come to the United States? Yes, you do, because there's a mass migration crisis and people are flooding across the borders because America is a great place to live as compared to almost everywhere else in the entire world, or arguably for sure as compared to everywhere else in the entire world. And you, this privileged probably upper middle class white person, overeducated, probably has a great career. You want to escape America because Trump is like, what do you think Trump is going to do to you? What do you think he's going to do?
They think, I was actually a very interesting event. This is turf related. I went with the Turfs, my favorite people of all time, to a local Northern Irish arts festival talk. It was like so boring. Actually, it wasn't boring. It wasn't boring at all. It was genuinely like my jaw was on the floor because it was a panel of, unscheduled topic, a panel of arts professionals, i.e. taxpayer spongers, like people who are living off the freaking sweat of the working class labor in the form of tax money to make dumb queer art. And so they have these jobs or they like dole out grants and stuff. And one of the guys on the panel who's lived here a long, long time, and he's originally, I think he moved here from England as a young adult, a family originally from Ghana. He's Black anyway. And he said he was going to New York because he, got a funded little fucking junket to put his little show on in New York. And he's like, my heart's beating out of my chest. I'm afraid they're going to pull me out of my car. Like that is all over. That sentiment is all over here. Like I'm in a Facebook group of expats and there are these crazy women being like, my trans daughter is afraid to go back to America. Like everyone is pretending like it's about them. Like everyone is pretending like it's about them.
Yeah.
It is insane. And it is, well, this guy is obviously an exception, but most of the ones up until that moment I've seen were women who were like, sorry to be crude, creaming their knickers, being like, maybe I'll actually get oppressed. Like they would just love that more than anything in the world.
Drive across Mexico.
Yeah, exactly.
1995 Ford F-150 across Mexico and get oppressed.
They think that they're going to be stopped at the passport control at JFK or something and hauled off into jail
because they voted for Kamala.
Yeah, or because they're trans. Like, what?
Jail. I was sitting at a restaurant here where my friends works, where I spend a lot of time, and this white tourista was sitting next to me, and she was telling me that her friends who were living in Bucerías, this couple, one of whom was American and his wife was Mexican, I suppose. And she was like, well, they're terrified to go back. And I was like, and they were probably just like her, like this was a rich lady. Like, well, because of Trump. And I was like, because of Trump, what? I was like, what do you mean? What's Trump going to do to you? She was like, well, just because, like, you know, because of what's going on with Trump. And I was like, what is it that I think is going to happen to them? She's like, well, do you know, maybe they'll get deported. I was like, but he's American. She's like, and then we just moved on from the conversation. But I was like, you guys are crazy. What are you talking about? You're afraid of America. You're ridiculous.
This is a jet, outside the right and the formerly, like the based former lefties or whatever you want to call people like us. That is the general consensus. I honestly think that.
I'm just going to respond to this comment. Somebody is asking, wait, is this the new regular time? No, there is no new regular time. I'm sorry. I know that's annoying for people who are trying to stay on schedule and watch the live stream. And I appreciate you all showing up at a new weird time. But Jenny lives in Ireland, so you're 7 hours ahead of me in Mexico. So if we were to stream at 7 p.m. my time, it would be, you know, very late in the middle of the night, Jenny said. Yeah. So we're doing this in the afternoon. So I'm trying to alert people to the times that we're streaming, but I'm trying to maintain Tuesdays at least for some consistency. Yeah. So let's get back to these angry girls. I mean, there was this one, they really think the world's a terrible place. They think that being female is some kind of terrible affliction and they're never going to get ahead or be happy, and that there's nothing that they can do to have a good life, essentially, which is strange. One of the young women, Anna, was convinced that pain was an intrinsic part of being female. So she says, women are the ones that give birth. She said, periods hurt. Early sexual experiences were often painful and pleasureless. You're taught to expect pain when you have sex. You're taught that so many forms of discomfort are normal. And that's a weird thing to say for a number of reasons. Because first of all, many forms of discomfort are normal. Like, life is uncomfortable. You just have to accept that and figure out how to deal with that. You're going to, have uncomfortable experiences. You're going to be sick. You're going to get injuries. Your body might hurt sometimes. Periods are uncomfortable. You have cramps. And the reality actually is that, and in some ways I think this connects to our conversation about younger men and older women, but the reality is that when you're young, you probably aren't having pleasurable sex. When you're 19, 20, you're not having great sex as a woman. I don't know that men really realize it, but they can probably tell when they're having sex with like a dead fish. But, because you don't know anything about your body. You don't know anything about your sexuality. This generation is even worse off because they've grown up watching pornography where they're watching these men be brutal and horrible and abusive and degrading to the women that they're having sex with. So it's not really any big surprise that they would be sort of turned off by the idea of having sex with men. I don't find porn sexy or appealing at all. I find it repulsive, and it makes me not want to have sex. And I remember seeing it when I was young and not wanting to have sex with my boyfriend because I was just so upset and grossed out by it. And I was like, is this what you like? Like, I don't like you then. You know what I mean? And, and I mean, the reason I think this is tied to the younger man, older woman thing is I think that older women are probably for sure a lot more enjoyable to have sex with than younger women are, because they're going to be more into it and more comfortable with themselves, more comfortable with their bodies, and just generally.
I mean, there was like a time, I think this is still ongoing. I hear reports of it, and I do know one person who, if in real life, who was like this, but there was like almost like there's a thirst for diagnoses. It's almost like if you don't have a diagnosis of some sort of handicap, you're not, like, that's almost unheard of. And I think girls, especially being very consensus based and being very, watchful of the group dynamics and picking up on all the subtleties and all the stuff, and being, a lot of girls are. I was not necessarily one of these girls, but a lot of girls are timid and delicate in temperament, very, very sensitive in temperament. They get these ideas that they're handicapped or disabled in some way, and maybe they are. I don't know, but their bodies, and they're being, just like you said, they're being, this idea is being reinforced upon them that everything about being a female is terrible. I personally lay that at the feet of feminism, but this obsession with periods and this obsession with female anatomy, like, we didn't really used to think about it that much, like, it wasn't like part of the discourse, certainly. That would all make them pretty crappy sex partners.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also if you don't trust, like, I think, and I didn't mention porn in my article because my article was already far too long. Because I actually, my essay was dealing with how I became a young socialist workers' party member and and how I grew out of it very quickly. But there was a lot of in this that resonated with me because when I was 19 and 20, I was isolated and depressed and deeply insecure, and I felt like I didn't have enough skills to survive, really. I was on my own. My parents were thousands of miles away. I was at university, but I felt helpless and I felt angry at my own helplessness. And like Jordan Peterson said, I turned that outward and said, "Oh, it's capitalism's fault." That was the easiest. It was easier for me to say that than it was for me to be brave and accept my inadequacies and get better at the things I was inadequate at. I was also in a very, very painful relationship with a man, that was very, very intense, but destabilizing because it was not a committed relationship. And that drove, like, I wanted to feel safe somewhere. I wanted to feel welcomed somewhere. And once I grew up, it only took a few more months because, you grow up fast. Like you see this when you become a mother. Children just develop so quickly, their skills and their abilities. And, like by the time I was even a few months older, then a year older, then a couple of years older, I finished university. I got a job. I got a decent paying job. And I was like, this is nonsense. I grew up. So I no longer needed these utterly stupid and inhumane political thought systems to make myself feel less inadequate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, a lot of I grew up in a family of Marxists and progressives, right. And, I grew up thinking that, having money and being rich and owning property was a bad thing. And, that the odds were inherently stacked against the poor and working class, which actually is true in a lot of ways. It is hard to escape poverty and the working class. But beyond that, I think when I got older and was out, living on my own and left to my own devices and became very enmeshed in radical feminism and socialism and things like that, I think I wanted an explanation for how I was feeling, which was really kind of angry and lacking in autonomy and control over my own life. You're directionless, you feel insecure. I was broke, working shitty jobs. I didn't really know how to not be broke. That's really frustrating and disempowering.
Yes, exactly the same. Exactly the same. In fact, I joined the Socialist Workers' Party in an immediate reaction to getting into a fight with my manager at a cafe that I was working in over something dumb, and I thought he was being ridiculous. And it was the only time I've ever done this. I walked out. I was actually quite a good waitress, and I was so like offended by he told me to leave the restaurant. Anyway, whatever. It was a dumb thing. And I was really angry. And because I actually kind of liked the job. It was really near my house where I lived. And it was handy to have this easy sort of job waiting tables at brunch, and I walked out of that and I walked into a socialist workers party pamphleting, selling newspapers, and I joined right then and there because I was mad at capitalism because I had a fight with my manager at my brunch cafe job.
Yeah, but it makes sense, and I felt I wasn't treated well by men when I was young.
Same.
But I didn't know how to deal with that because I didn't know what a boundary was. And I didn't know how to respond.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so, of course you're like drawn to feminism where you're like, well, men are oppressive and men want to dominate and, maybe you just shouldn't be around men at all, which I could never manage because I always wanted to be around men. Because I'm a pick-me. Because I love them. They're so fun.
I know, they're so fun.
But like you're angry and you don't know why, and you're looking for a reason why and a solution to why, and you're offered that in the form of politics and activism. And then you're told, then I was told by all these feminists that I was around and working with and who are my mentors that everything is political and all of your interactions are political. All of your relationships are political. Your whole life is political, which is crazy. Like, I don't want to think about politics all the time. I don't want to think about my relationships as political. I want to have relationships with human beings. Yeah.
It's a very toxic way to live. I think that women our age and older, boomers as well, who were very left-wing and progressive and didn't break away from that, exactly what you're just saying, that like didn't have that instinct to be like, no, I don't want my personal life to be political. I know it's a slogan, but like, come on, let's be real. Women who didn't do that have raised very damaged, very unhappy children. And I think these girls are the daughters of those women. I mean, I know, because I know a little, I remember you telling me a bit about your dad. Wasn't your dad like a trade union guy?
Yeah. When I was a kid, he worked for Canada Post, and he was very involved in. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I knew a lot of lefties as a child because my mother had been a Trotskyist and my dad, was they were bohemians. Everyone I knew was basically left wing, just depending on somewhere on the spectrum between Marxist Leninist to liberal. And the ones that I noticed early on that people who were on the far left, like Marxist Leninists, tended to make really shitty parents.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was because they did view everything as political, and they did view family life as oppressive. And that's a terrible burden to lay on a child. That's genuinely the worst thing you can do. I mean, not the worst thing you can do, obviously, but in terms of like setting your child up for like a mindset of success, like that is the opposite. And I know people very, very well who did not come out of that to lead happy, productive lives.
Yeah, and you end up with this perspective where you think you can't get ahead because it's impossible because you're working class and that's who you are for life. You're never going to own anything. You're never going to have any money. You're never going to have any property. The only answer is communist revolution. And you end up growing up embittered and unable to figure out how to get ahead on your own because that's not an option. It has to be this bigger systemic change. It's not just about you, and individualism is bad. So even to think about it in terms of how can I get ahead is bad and immoral and unethical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there's I think that niche university, again, I do differentiate the trade union people a little bit, but the people I'm talking about, like the white collar, the academic types that essentially like escaped the lab and came to dominate a lot of white liberal culture, and interpersonally as well. And so I, I was saying as I was saying earlier today, like I think there's like it would be we're sort of working backwards in a way from like Gen Z. We skipped to us Gen Xers, but like I see in the millennial generation and early iterate like the early harvest of what the Gen Z girls are now going through. And I want to ask you a question. Like, do you like? So I read Lena Dunham's book, and I've already talked a lot about it, so I don't need to go into it at too length unless you want to. But one of the things I was really struck by was her incredible guilt and shame. That according to her book, her father is quoted in the book as saying, "You were born like you've been like this since you were 5." And I think maybe that's her temperament to a certain degree. It must be partly temperamental, although I don't know how you get born with no one's born feeling guilty. I don't know. So I'm not sure how, but I do think that there has been this subliminal almost messaging to girls, white liberal girls, well off or educated girls, that they are guilty and they're fair game for punishment. And I don't know how else to explain Lena. And I've seen this I've read this book by, I think she might have been, I don't know if she was millennial or Gen Z, but she wrote this novel about young women, whatever. I read it because I used to be a young woman. I'm interested in this kind of storyline. And the boyfriend is like beating her. And it was the same subplot in Normal People, the Irish novel, that was a massive hit, where the main character, Marianne, gets into this relationship with this guy who's like beating her. And then she goes into like a sub-dom relationship. And I'm like, this is very alien to me. Like maybe it's just because all of my temperament is the opposite of guilt-ridden. I'm like quite a feisty, assertive person, but by temperament. And so are all of my female friends, it turns out. But like not a single one of my female friends, when we were in the prime of our dumb, mistake-making youth, when we were doing lots of dumb stuff, there was never that dynamic of I deserve to be punished by men physically. Like, what the fuck? Like, nobody. That was not on the table. Like, that was the farthest thing from our. And it wasn't like it was everyone was hooking up. Like, it was very free in that way, but there was absolutely none of that shame and that guilt.
No, I don't recall ever feeling like that either. And I was in some abusive relationships with men, but I don't think it was because I deserved it. I think it was just a product of replicating what I'd learned to be comfortable with as a child. But, I was never drawn to BDSM at all, and for the most part refused to participate in that, with the exception of probably some little blips there when we, tried a couple things. But like, I don't relate to that kind of being drawn towards sexual abuse as a form of punishment.
It just crops up in these books and these works in culture. And I'm like, where did you learn that? Because that was not the messaging I ever received. I definitely got the messaging I received was that it was like great to be footloose and fancy free, which is an old fashioned euphemism for what, I think.
Just do whatever you want.
I
still think women should do whatever they want. I sort of go back and forth, sorry to change the subject, but I sort of like oscillate between this, like,
me too.
You should wait and don't be slutty and like make him work for it and like, play all these games and and then I'm like, or just like do whatever you feel like doing and have a fun time. I don't know. I haven't.
See, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be very, very honest here. Like, there's things that I am holding back from you here, Megan, because I have a kid and I'm like, this is going to be on the internet forever. So I'm just like, holding back a little bit. Next time we see each other in person, you can get the full download. But anyway, I think, No, it was, yeah, I'm the same. Now that I'm older, I'm slightly more judgmental because I know, like, I know that all of those old adages are correct. Why buy the cow and you can get the milk for free or whatever? Actually, that's not really that correct. That's not my experience,
No, me
but
neither.
I'm also like, I wouldn't change my youth, really. There's only maybe 1 or 2 things I would change. One thing I would change in all of it. And I think that the process of heartbreak and feeling betrayed, um, that was a learning experience. I don't think necessarily, I don't think you grow up without having those painful moments, actually, which is something Lena Dunham says in her book, which is, I think, very true.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one reason to hold out is because women are so much more wired to bond with men through sex, and we get attached a lot easier through sex. I think men are sort of wired to, they can have casual sex, and for a long time, they can just have sex with a woman for months on end and never really get attached to her. And I don't think that women are built like that. And you end up, so if you start having sex with somebody before you really know if you want to be in a relationship with them or not, you get attached regardless. And then you end up in a relationship with them or feeling tortured because they're not committing to you in the way they want you to, or they're not treating you right or whatever. So I think that's like one of the actual bigger risks for women of casual sex. But getting back to Lena Dunham, I mean, I haven't read her book. I did just watch this hour-long interview that she did with the New York Times. I've never been a Lena Dunham hater, and I've long actually defended Lena Dunham. I really liked Girls. I think I've watched it all the way through 3 times now. It's recently, this past year, I rewatched it. It's still very good. I think she's very smart. I think she's very talented. And I know, we've talked about this before, but the hatred directed at her is so extreme. And sorry for sounding like a feminist, but I do think that it's because people don't think she's attractive enough, or thin enough to have the kind of success and attention that she's received, and certainly not for her to have been comfortable showing her naked body on screen in Girls, because she had kind of, she had a pretty like normal body, I would say, but it's not what we're used to seeing on screen. It was a little bit fattish. She obviously doesn't exercise very much, but
Right.
it wasn't, she wasn't obese at that point.
No, she was heavy. I mean, she looked better with no clothes on than she looked with clothes on, because the outfit choices on the show are so weird, like these tiny little shorts and stuff like that. But I think it was a deliberate choice because she was this sort of gormless, in some ways, very unselfconscious character, which was part of the appeal, I think, of her. I wish I could remember where it was. I don't even remember what platform it was. Was it Twitter? Was it Substack? I don't remember. But somebody described her perfectly as the anti-hero. Hannah Horvath was an anti-hero. And the reason that is so important is because I can't think of a single female anti-hero. That's not a role for women. See, women, and I don't attribute this to patriarchy, because I think, well, whatever, I just don't, but it doesn't matter. There's this subtle or very obvious but unspoken hierarchy, which is that female characters are supposed to be either like they can be very bad in a way, like they can be like fairy tale bad, or they can be very good. But there always has to have this sort of sheen of artifice around them. And a lot of there are actresses who do that and maintain the glamour and mystique and still are very good actresses, like Gwyneth Paltrow. But a lot of the time it's just like female characters, especially before, actually something might have gotten better recently. One of the only few things that has. Female characters were very kind of one-dimensional. And being pretty was kind of important, and being good was important, but there was none of the sort of like raw depth. And suddenly Lena Dunham and Hannah Horvath like burst into the culture with her big fat cellulite thighs and her terrible clothes sense. Excuse me.
Her big butt, her big thighs, her little boobs. I mean, yeah, I can talk. I mean, and I think people also thought that I think people didn't like that she was with Adam Driver because I don't think they felt that she deserved the attention and love of Adam Driver. I don't think that people thought she deserved the attention and love of like a handsome, tall, in shape, kind of cool guy. Like she was dating all these guys who were like pretty attractive, and people were like, how dare she? Because she's not hot according to us.
But Adam Driver was not attractive.
Well, but girls liked him in that show.
You know why
right?
they liked him?
Thought he was hot, even though he wasn't technically, like, his face wasn't technically attractive. I mean, he had a hot bod. He was like tall and athletic.
But it was his character. It was his personality. He was actually a very good boyfriend.
Yeah.
He was he was just an excellent character. Very well drawn character. And the reason he became attractive was because of that. I think he was very funny looking and awkward in the beginning. And I think he is extremely good to Hannah Horvath until, of course, she leaves, and then his dumb boy brain kind of kicks in, and he just like shuts her out. But that story arc is absolutely heartbreaking to this day. I rewatch the scene with the soup, good soup. And I just I do it every so often just to be like, this is so sad.
I want them to get back together so bad.
I know they should have. They really should have. I don't know why they didn't.
I can't believe they didn't. I know I didn't like the ending of that show. It's like you don't get back together with Adam Driver and then you go have a baby and live with Marnie.
With Marnie, I know. I mean, I'm glad I like the ending of it. And also in a way that the fact that he ended up with Jessa was, I thought it was consistent with the show, which kind of was very hard on all their characters. Like it was almost cruel to them in that it never had the sort of sanitized, tidy ending. It never gave them satisfaction. It never gave. Marnie was constantly humiliated. Jessa was just a terrible, like a very unlikable person. And they never horrible friend.
Yeah.
And there was never any redemption arc for any of them, really, except at the very last moment for Hannah when she sort of finally gets her baby to latch. And it's like the only moment of peace in the entire 6 seasons or something.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it was nice that she actually went through with the pregnancy instead of getting an abortion and doing the, feminist thing.
Another thing that show was great at was showing how much, and this, I don't know if I would have picked up on this talk of female reproductive suppression, which I don't really buy into, but the boomer women undermining her relationship with Adam, kept putting doubts in her mind about Adam, her mother's, of course, and also very, very good depiction of how it feels to be a middle-aged woman, to be left by your husband who decides he's gay, and the sort of like gay narcissism and her bitterness. Like that was so raw and real. And how she kind of unloads that onto her daughter, like in very unfair ways, but that were also sort of human.
Yeah. I mean, I think, was there anything that you read in the book that you found particularly interesting or revealing? In the interview, they said they alluded to there almost being a relationship between Lena Dunham and Adam Driver that didn't come to fruition, which I felt pretty excited by.
She claims that they had, I think the headlines made a bigger deal out of it. She didn't really throw him under the bus. I think she was giving a fairly, what sounded like a believable depiction of his kind of volatility on set. Like moody kind of method actor kind of guy, very intense, which you're like, yeah, I mean, that kind of checks out. And that how they, they they had this intense connection from the characters that they were playing. And at one point they almost sleep together, but she in the end backs out and they never speak of it again. And he gets married. In real life. This is in real life. So he's got a girlfriend and the girlfriend's away.
In a relationship.
Yeah, he was in a relationship. And he then married the woman. So she tells, I mean, I guess she's telling a tale out of school where Adam Driver's girlfriend was away, and he was doing something like maybe he was doing some other project, and he was all like riled up with the method and the acting and the macho, and they're texting back and forth in like increasingly flirtatious ways, and then she says, "Do you want to come over?" And he says, "Well, if I come over, you know what's going to happen," or something like that. It's a direct allusion to them getting together finally, and then he does come over, but she doesn't let him in, and then that's it. That's the end of it. They never speak of it again.
Well,
which, I mean,
the right decision.
Yes, she definitely made the right decision. Also because, I mean, she really is, as she appears, both in Girls and in her online persona, this sort of quivering wreck, an absolute wreck. Her body is just complete, like her. I mean, I'm such a huge Lena Dunham fan, and I defend her. I would defend her to the ends of the earth. But like, even I was like, come on, like again, like you're sick again. Like I would not be able to tolerate it. I was like, you're so annoying. Yeah. And like she's actually, it seems like even her parents at the end of it are like, really back in the hospital.
Yeah. I know that's one of the things that I find most annoying about her. That's what I don't like about her. It's like you're constantly sick and you have all of these afflictions all of the time.
Mysteries,
like a health problem, this health problem. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, is that normal to constantly be having these health problems? I mean, and then she talks about, she was like, I was on drugs. And she talks about her struggles with addiction, but I don't actually know what drugs she was on or what she was addicted to.
Prescription meds. Klonopin, Percocet.
Oh, these girls are so boring. Like, why don't you get addicted to like
I don't even know. Like, I'm like, I don't like, I've never taken any of these.
No, me neither. Never. I have zero interest. Like, what I want to sit in my, like, do I want to go to sleep? Like, woo!
Right. Exactly.
Like, do something fun.
This is what I mean. It's such a massive gulf between millennials and Gen
like,
Z.
Be an alcoholic. God, go to the bar.
I know, like, you can afford cocaine. What the hell's wrong with you?
No, I want to lie in my bed and take Klonopin and go to sleep and be antisocial.
It's just so weird to me. I know.
The most boring addiction I've ever heard of in my life.
I know. It's like, go to the bar and stay there till 4 a.m. and then go to some random Coke den, like a normal person.
Yeah, like go to somebody's kitchen until 9 a.m. and then do a walk of shame past all the families getting up to go out and start their days. All the runners.
Sit and drink a 40 in Tompkins Square Park watch all the school kids go to school. Like, not that I've ever done that or anything. Yeah, no, it's like a night and day. It's night and day. And I remember when I was in my late 20s, mid to late 20s, meeting millennials who were then, I guess, in their early 20s, and just feeling like they were an alien species. Like, I was like, you guys are like dead inside. I remember thinking that. I remember like meeting two millennial men, young men, and being like, you guys are like, you just are dead inside. It was such a marked difference. And I genuinely put it down to the fact that we were just much more free range, and therefore we grew up more robust. Am I being overly simplistic?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think we grew up without the internet, and we were, socialized properly. We did dangerous things. We learned how to be independent. We took our bikes out alone and scraped our knees and, got in scraps with our friends and had to figure it out on our own. And yeah, I mean, we weren't coddled and we weren't traumatized by pornography.
Yeah.
I did this debate. I'm not going to get too deep into it because we've gone over an hour, so we should probably sign off soon. But I did this debate about pornography in New York last week with this woman who, I don't know how old she is. I would probably guess mid-30s or something like that. But she's, she worked for MindGeek for years, which is the company that owns Pornhub, which I just find repulsive. Oh, wow. Like, it's the most unethical thing you could do. I mean, Pornhub was discovered to, as if anybody didn't know, to be hosting hundreds, maybe even thousands of trafficking, probably thousands of trafficking, rape videos of underage girls, non-consensual videos. See, if you're working for those companies, that's there and you're taking a paycheck from them, you're a bad person. really. Like, she said in an interview with the CBC that I listened to in preparation for the debate that the first thing that she had to do when she got to her first day on the job was to sit in a cubicle and just watch a bunch of pornography. It's like, you're seeing these videos, what's there. This is who you're working for. But in any case, she says, I started watching pornography at 11. And that's a really weird way to frame it, because you were exposed to pornography when you were 11, and then obviously it rewired your brain. I mean, I think that's a form of child sexual abuse.
It is.
This is how molesters groom kids into victimization, by showing them pornography. I mean, you're just a kid. You don't have a sexuality. You don't know what you're looking at. Those are disgusting, traumatic, abusive images to be exposed to when you're a kid. And she's just saying this like it's a freaking normal thing. And this is normal for these younger generations to just grow up traumatized in that particular way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I didn't realize it was actually 9:30. I thought it was 15:15. So I do have to go.
Let's go. That was really enjoyable. As always, great to see you. I can't wait to talk again. Yeah. Everyone who's listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. I put these streams up on Spotify and Substack after the fact. Just search Where Are All the Women on Spotify. My Substack is meganmurphy.ca. Jenny is on Substack at, is it just Jenny Holland, or is it called
Jenny E. Holland?
Jenny E. Holland. Saving Culture from Itself is your YouTube channel, which is awesome and doing really well. Do go over there and also subscribe. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday. Not you specifically. I'll give you a break.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you so much for having me. I love talking to you, and we'll talk again soon.
Yes. Take care. Bye, everybody. Bye. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.